Hello, my name is John Rose. In this video, I'd like to take a closer look at circumstances, triggers, and upsets. And I always find this fascinating to me, especially when I see an older person never learn this lesson. This is probably one of the most common lessons most people never figure out. How certain things happened to us in the past that hurt us, and then when confronted many years, decades later, when we encounter a similar situation, it takes us right back to that same time period, and we revert to what we were as a little child, and we act like a little kid. It's quite humorous in a way, if it wasn't so sad to see people do this, especially an older person. And this happened to me about a decade ago when I was at my girlfriend's house, and I said something, and her mother just freaked out. And I got up and I said, "Look, man, I don't know how you were hurt in the past, but what I just said had nothing to do with anything that's bad. I say this to everybody all the time. Why is it upsetting you? Because it somehow triggered something that happened to you in your past." And it could be something like, "My dad yelled at me one time, he raised his voice, and he did this and he did that, and every time someone raises his voice, I think of my dad, and boy, I'm not a kid anymore, I can get back at him." So, this is what we have to understand, how circumstances are not to blame, and yet we blame the circumstance, isn't it? That guy pissed me off. Well, I always love the proverbial orange analogy. When you squeeze an orange, what comes out of an orange? Orange juice. Why? Because that's what's inside the orange. So when someone squeezes you, if out comes anger, that's because that's what's inside of you. Can't blame the person doing the squeezing. And what's so fascinating about this is that people have different triggers. And I know this happens to all of you guys. How many times have you said something to somebody and they just blew up, and you still can't figure out why they blew up? Well, somehow you triggered an event in their past that hurt them, and it still hurts them today. And as soon as this happens, we get tunnel vision, and we can't clearly see what is wrong. And people really struggle when this happens. They get too emotional, and again, we want to blame the circumstances. Now, can we blame the circumstances? Can we blame society? Well, you know what? In a way, we can blame society, because society did attack earlier when we were helpless. We were taught the same mistakes our parents were taught that created the hell we live in. We shouldn't be exposed to most of the bullshit we're exposed to. So we can sort of blame our circumstances. But it always reminds me of that great story Anthony Robbins told in his book about the two boys that were raised by, or started to be raised. They had this father that was a pretty bad guy, always ended up in jail, was arrested many dozens times, and finally they took the kids away from him, and they're both raised in different homes. And they were interviewed later in life, and it was interesting how one boy turned out to be exactly like his dad, and the other boy turned out to be just the opposite. And they were both asked, "Why did you guys turn out the way you did?" And they both gave the same answer. "Look at my dad, what do you expect?" Look at my dad, what do you expect? I'm just like him, or I'm not going to be like him. So it's how we evaluate those events that happen to us that really matter. Unfortunately, a lot of these things happen to us when we were young, and many of these might not even be accurate interpretations because we were so young and we didn't really understand what was going on. But a lot of them are pretty genuine and real, and they haunt us today. How do we get rid of those negative upsets? You got to confront them, bring them into the present. The best way is to do a juice fast, because we store emotions. Everywhere a thought goes, so does an emotion. And we store those. And an emotion is a thought linked to a sensation. So we store all of our hurt in our body. When we do a long, extended, properly conducted, solid food vacation, go down below in the description box if you want to do it. Look for my first step. When we do that, we don't just cleanse on a physical level and a mental level. We cleanse on an emotional level. That's one of the most exciting things about this. So don't get so upset when someone says something that makes you think back on something. Don't let amygdalosis ruin your life, where we have this emotional knee-jerk reaction before we have a chance to intellectualize about it. But remember, when these upsets are triggered, we get tunnel vision. We can't clearly see what's wrong, and we can't change what we don't acknowledge. We have to acknowledge we live in a sick world. We've got a lot of past pain in the past, or hurt in the past. We got to bring it to the future. We got to experience the pain in the present. Let it go. As Confucius says, to be wronged is nothing unless it's remembered. Now I know that sure sounds a lot easier said than done. But remember, one of the best ways to let it go is a solid food vacation. If you haven't done this before, check out the Dr. Roba interview down below in the description box. Check out the Deborah Duncan show with 6 of my students. And then go to my seminar where you can do a solid food vacation. And when you do, my friends, you're in for a treat.